Uh-oh, Donald, you thought that you were really going to bring down Canada and make Canada the 51st state? Seriously? You're losing the economic war right now to Canada that you unleashed. Canadians have been absolutely furious this entire year at Donald Trump and his regime, and Canada has fought back. Canada is winning the economic war and trade war against the United States. They are targeting specific sectors like the bourbon industry, like the wine industry and others, and making industries that have typically given more money to Trump and Republicans and making them pay. So let's take count of the economic war that Donald Trump unleashed against Canada and how the people of Canada stood together, stood strong, stood tough, and fought back against the Trump regime going elbows up. The leader of Midas Canada, Charlie Angus, said we should reflect on how Canada has stood up to the bully and struck back. Here's what Charlie Angus, who leads Midas Canada.
The end of year one of the economic war with the United States. We don't know where it goes in year two. It's going to probably get more serious. But it's important at the end of year one to look at the victories, the costs, and where we stand, because we're standing pretty okay right now. And in any war, there's certain battles, certain victories, certain defeats that become incredibly symbolic. And nothing is more symbolic than the torching of the American bourbon economy. That's your fault, Donald Trump, and we're going to get into the extent of the disaster that you have brought upon your own people.
You know, I've been watching this political circus for a long time now, and I'll be honest with you, I thought I'd developed a pretty high tolerance for absurdity. I thought I'd seen just about every possible distortion of diplomacy, every rhetorical stunt, every strongman bluff dressed up as policy. But every so often something happens that still manages to stop me in my tracks, not because it's shocking in a tabloid sense, but because it reveals just how far we've drifted from anything resembling normal, stable international relations. And that's exactly what this moment between Donald Trump and Canada's new Prime Minister, Mark Carney, represents. You probably saw the headlines. You probably heard the surface story. Trump jokes or half jokes or not really jokes at all about Canada becoming the 51st state. Carney pushes back. Commentators frame it as a clash of personalities, a tense meeting, maybe even a bit of theater on the sidelines of a World Cup event that was supposed to be about cooperation and celebration. But if that's all you take away from this, you've missed what actually matters. What happened in that room wasn't about banter. It wasn't about humor. It wasn't even primarily about ego. It was about power, leverage, and whether sovereignty itself is treated as something negotiable in the modern global economy. Let me slow this down and walk through it with you because the details matter. This took place around a gathering that should have symbolized everything positive about North American integration. The United States, Canada, and Mexico are co-hosting the next World Cup. That alone is a reminder of how deeply intertwined these countries are economically, culturally, and institutionally. And yet, behind closed doors, the conversation veered sharply away from unity and towards something much darker. Tariffs, trade pressure, and a recurring suggestion from the American president that Canada's problems could all go away if it simply stopped existing as an independent country. Now, I want you to really sit with that for a moment. This wasn't said once in passing. It's been raised repeatedly in official settings, and it's been framed not as a threat, but as a kind of twisted offer. The United States imposes tariffs that hurt Canadian industries, disrupt supply chains, and raise costs for workers and consumers on both sides of the border. Then the same president implies that Canada could escape this pressure by accepting absorption. That's not negotiation in any meaningful sense. That's coercion dressed up as pragmatism. And here's where Mark Carney enters the story in a way that fundamentally changes its tone. Carney isn't a career politician trained to smooth things over with vague language and careful hedging. He comes from central banking, from a world where credibility is everything and where words move markets. When he says something, it's meant to be understood literally. So when he looked at Trump and said Canada is not for sale,
Donald Trump just threw reporters out of the Mar-a-Lago dining room during his meeting with President Zelensky. He said to the reporters, "You want some food? You want some food? Why don't you go take some food? Oh, or are you going to call it a bribe? Get out of here." While Donald Trump was flanked by Witkoff and Kushner and other Putin bootlickers, he threw the media out. And then thereafter, when he held a very short press conference with Zelensky, Donald Trump basically blamed Ukraine the same as Russia for the ongoing Russian invasion. Donald Trump also said that he would be giving Putin yet another call today. Trump and Putin coordinated and spoke together before this meeting at the Mar-a-Lago dining room with Zelensky, and Trump says, "I'm going to give Putin another call." So let me just show you what went down here. This is where Donald Trump threw the reporters out of the Mar-a-Lago dining room. Also, what a sign of disrespect for Zelensky that Trump was holding this meeting in a dining room right now. Watch what took place as he throws the reporters out. Here, play this clip.
Are you okay? Is everyone fine? Margot, if you would, I think you could sit outside and have some food. Would you like to have food, or do you consider that a bribe? And therefore you cannot write honestly, or therefore you have to write a bad story. Okay, because if you'd like, would you like something to eat at this time? Yes or no? You can speak.
Yes, sir.
Yes? Okay. Margot,
Yes, sir.
take them outside, tell the chef, serve them a little lunch, okay?
Thank you, press. Thank you, press. Thank you, press. Thank you, guys. Thank you, guys. Thank you, press. Thank you, press.
That should
Please lead the
guarantee
way,
good
please.
stories,
Thank
but
you,
it
press.
won't.
Thank you, guys.
They'll only get worse. So go out of their way to make them worse. He gave us a hamburger. We have to make them.
Then Donald Trump is asked about Russia's recent attacks on Kyiv, on civilian centers in Kyiv and throughout Ukraine, as a sign of further escalation. And Russia and Putin have significantly increased their bombings of civilian populations under Donald Trump. And Russia is out there saying it doesn't want peace. It wants total surrender through its special operation. It says these lands belong to us. We don't want a deal. That's what they've been saying publicly. I've been showing you clips of that. So Trump is asked about the recent attacks, and Trump goes, "Yeah, I think Ukraine is just as responsible."
Thousands of Americans are about to lose something they didn't even realize was a privilege. For decades, they've crossed into Canada through wilderness lakes, remote forests, and backcountry trails without stopping at a border checkpoint, a quick paddle across the boundary waters, a snowmobile ride through cross-border terrain, a boat trip to their Canadian cabin, no customs booth, no inspection, just a permit in their pocket and the assumption that Canada's northern wilderness was essentially open territory. That assumption ends in 2026. The Canada Border Services Agency announced it in the driest possible language, an internal review which considered security, operational efficiency, and the evolving risk environment. But make no mistake, this is not routine bureaucracy. This is Canada fundamentally restructuring how it manages its shared border with the United States at exactly the moment Trump is demanding maximum American access and minimum Canadian oversight. This is Canada quietly asserting sovereignty over remote border regions that Americans have treated as essentially open for decades. And the beautiful part? Trump has no idea what just hit him. This is the story of how a seemingly technical border program change represents Canada's most significant assertion of border control in a generation. How thousands of permit holders, 90% of them American, are about to discover that casually crossing into Canada through wilderness areas is over. And how this shift fits perfectly into Canada's broader strategy of responding to Trump's threats, not with loud confrontation, but with quiet actions that change facts on the ground. But before we dive into this incredible story, if you appreciate in-depth analysis like this, hit that like button and subscribe to stay informed on the stories that truly matter. Tonight, we are showing you what the remote area border crossing program actually was, why Canada is ending it now, and what it means when your northern neighbor decides that security matters more than American convenience. For decades, the remote area border crossing program, known as RABC, allowed approved travelers to enter Canada through remote wilderness locations without physically reporting at a staffed port of entry. Hold a permit and you could cross through the Boundary Waters Canoe Area Wilderness, paddle across Lake of the Woods, boat along Lake Superior's Canadian shore, or traverse dozens of other locations where no customs booth exists. The program covered the Northwest Angle in Minnesota, the Pigeon River through to and including Lake of the Woods, the Canadian shore of Lake Superior, the Sault Ste. Marie Upper Lock System, and Cockburn Island. These are wilderness regions where enforcing traditional border controls would require staffing remote outposts that might see only a handful of crossings per week. Permit holders still declared goods brought into Canada, but did not physically appear at a checkpoint. The system relied on trust. Approximately 11,000 people held RABC permits yearly. The crucial detail, roughly 90% were American. Canada created a program primarily benefiting American citizens by allowing convenient access to Canadian wilderness without driving to staffed crossings. American fishermen accessed Canadian waters. American snowmobilers traversed cross-border trails. American cabin owners traveled without hour-long detours to the nearest port. Canada provided this free service, absorbing administrative costs for processing applications, background checks, and compliance monitoring, until Trump made clear that good neighborly relations are not his priority. And Canada decided free services for Americans casually crossing the border are not a priority either. The Canada Border Services Agency announced on December 19, 2025, that the Remote Area Border Crossing Program will end on September 14, 2026. Current valid permits will remain active until September 13th to allow for transition. The official explanation focused on security and modernization. The agency stated the decision was based on an internal review of the Remote Area Border Crossing Program, which considered security, operational efficiency, and the evolving risk environment at Canada's border. The new system will require all travelers entering Canada through previously remote areas to report either at a staffed port of entry or at a designated telephone reporting site. Canada will establish new telephone reporting locations in.
This is another drama loading. Let me say, people are tired. People are tired. Please, Trump, stop this. Now it's Canada. We are tired of this drama. People want their country to stay in peace. Leave Canada alone. People of Canada want peace. They don't want war. They want peace for the sake of their family, for the sake of their children. They just want peace. Please, please stop this. Let the people of Canada be. Let the people of Canada be. They want peace. They don't want war. They don't want someone to disturb their mind. They don't want someone to disturb their life. They just want peace with American. Let the people be. Let the people stay in peace. We stand with the Canadian. Let them be. Let them stay with peace. Okay?